to start with just a general overview of American higher education. So just some quick facts. I think a lot of times people don't understand how many colleges and universities there are in the US, and we call them colleges and universities. College meaning that typically it's a smaller institution that is just offering a bachelor's degree, and university really implies going all the way up to the doctoral level and having a significant research capacity. We have different types of degrees. We have associate's degrees, which are the 2-year degree, and our community college bachelor's degrees, which you can get at a college and a university. Master's is typically 1 to 3 years, and doctoral degrees, I see many of you have doctor in front of your name. So you know that that is 3 years to whatever, right? How long it takes you to finish your research and to finish writing your dissertation. Universities often have intensive English programs, and they have specialized programs on training. So these are just some of the quick facts about the amount of schools that are in the United States, and the amount of institutions, the types of degrees that are offered, and how students might move through the US system. Just a few quick facts about international students that I find really interesting. So the US is a big destination for students coming here to study. And you can really see from that first bullet how enrollment has changed over the past years because of the pandemic. So we have just over 900,000 international students as of the 2021 school year. And then before the pandemic, it was much higher. So these are the top sending countries: China, India, South Korea, Canada, and Saudi Arabia. And that's pretty much true at Oakland as well. And at Oakland, we have about 900 international students. There are different institution types in the US, and sometimes people don't understand the differences between these types. So there's a public institution, and that means that you usually get a significant amount of funds from the state government and taxpayers. And so Oakland University, where I work, is a public institution. They're private institutions. They still get a significant amount of federal dollars with respect to kind of federal aid for students. So, and research money. Just because you're private doesn't mean you don't have the support of the government. You do. You just have less in terms of taxpayer dollars. And then there are private universities that have a religious affiliation, for example, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we have a new type of, I guess it's not new, but a proliferating type of institution, which is a for-profit institution. And my guess is that you have these options in Pakistan as well. So public are autonomous, but they're linked to the state in which it lives. So you see that most public universities are very autonomous. There's been a little bit of interesting news and things that are happening, especially in the state of Florida, with respect to their governor there trying to take a little bit more control over the university setting. But in general, these are big autonomous organizations and institutions that, even though they receive state funding, are still fairly autonomous. Oakland University is the state of Michigan public university. There are many of them. Michigan State is probably one that you're familiar with, and University of Michigan, Michigan State and University of Michigan, also Wayne State in Detroit. These are really the big flagship schools for the state. All 50 states have public universities. They all have incredibly high levels of standards, and if it's a big public university, you're going to get a great education there. Public universities are usually less expensive than private universities. You have what's called in-state versus out-of-state tuition. So people that are from the state of Michigan pay one fee, and then people who are international or even from the state of Ohio or the state of Indiana pay another fee that's higher than the in-state tuition, and that's because of the taxpayer-funded base. So if you're a taxpayer in Michigan, then you're funding your university and you have the in-state tuition, and if you're out of state, then you pay a slightly higher rate. And the state appropriates some funds from the university, as I said earlier. That's a picture of Oakland. I just thought I would throw it in there. It's very hot and summery today, but that's what our campus, part of our campus, looks like in fall. Little picture break here. There's another part of our campus. We were founded by Matilda Dodge Wilson, who was the heir to the Dodge Chrysler car family fortune. And she built a mansion on this property and then donated the property in the 1950s for the universities to start. And that is Meadowbrook Mansion, and it's still on our campus and visited by many people and used for many different things on our campus. Private universities. So there's typically less state control over the university. There's no state funding per se usually, but they still have to be compliant with state and federal regulations. They still compete for and receive large portions of federal research dollars. When you're talking about universities in the United States and the research that they do, really the big dollar money and the largest amount of money is coming from the US government, especially in the sciences. So all the universities, regardless of their status, compete for those funds. Private universities have one tuition rate. It's generally higher than a public university. And some examples are well-known schools like Harvard and Northwestern. There are some with religious affiliations. They may have a mission and character and, that's a little bit different than a standard non-religious private university. And I'll just cite one: University of Notre Dame is a Catholic university, Georgetown as well. There are other universities that have other religious affiliations, but they, and each of those campuses is different depending on how they see their religious mission and their educational mission. We also have private single-sex schools, mostly for women, although there are still a few for men. And I just gave some examples there of those universities or those colleges. So those are still options in the United States, and some students prefer those options. That's a quick view of the private landscape. So there are also for-profit institutions. And so these are institutions that are run as a business for profit. And I gave some examples there. University of Phoenix is one that a lot of people have heard about. These programs appeal to people. They're really not any cheaper. In fact, as you can see, the bullet point I have there is they can be actually very expensive. But there's an ease of enrollment in courses. They tend to have many course options. They cater to working adults. And they make it easy for you to sign up, to be admitted, and to move through the degree program. Typically, there are a lot of online courses. Campus life is not really important so much with for-profit universities. And I always say to people who are overseas and thinking about enrolling in one of these schools is you really want to seek independent confirmation of the value of their degree and seek to understand how they're accredited. There was just a bit of a interesting thing. The US government just wiped out all the student loans for students who have gone to some of these universities because they were promised a certain type of degree and able to get a degree, and none of that happened. And so the promises did not equal, the reality did not equal the promises that the students were made for enrolling and paying tuition. And so these universities benefited from federal loans that go to students to pick any university, but they picked up this type of university. And so the government just wiped out student loan debt with respect to a lot of these universities because of a complete collapse of what they had promised for students. Some questions or some information about admissions. So especially for internationals, what I always say to people, and this would not necessarily, could maybe not be true for Pakistan because English is so widely spoken, but English proficiency is really important for coming to a US university. And so mostly universities will ask you to provide some confirmation of your level of English, either through an exam or other options they have laid out for you. You have to have a relevant diploma, a high school diploma for a bachelor's degree, a four-year bachelor's degree for any kind of graduate degree. There are some school systems that are patterned into a 3-year bachelor's degree. That makes it harder to go directly into a graduate program in the US. Typically, schools are looking for a 4-year bachelor's degree. And then education in the US is expensive, especially if you don't have access to federal loans, which people coming from overseas who are not US citizens or green card holders would not have access to those federal loans. So the ability to afford really kind of plays into that. There are some standardized tests that are sometimes asked for with respect to being to your application package for universities at the undergraduate level. There's often a test called an SAT or an ACT. However, many schools don't require this for internationals. Some of the most competitive schools do, but really what we've seen with the pandemic is some of these schools have dropped these tests completely. Some are bringing them back, but some I think are deciding to go what's called test optional. And for a graduate degree, there's typically the GRE or the GMAT. Those are kind of standardized tests that students need to take in some cases to be admitted to a program. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. There we go. So let me just make sure. Yeah. Okay. So I think that what's really interesting, and this touches on research, is that while I just said that you need a significant amount of funds to come to a U.S. program, there are many PhD programs in the U.S. that offer what is called an assistantship. And so if you have students who are bright, or you're thinking about someone coming to the U.S. for education, an assistantship usually pays for all the course fees, your health insurance, and a living stipend. And so you find students who maybe come from a modest background who are able to come to the U.S. in a PhD or a doctoral program because U.S. universities have assistantships. And a lot of the money in the U.S. system with respect to supporting students is at the graduate level. And that ties back to really the university's focus on research, right? Because these PhD students are supporting their faculty members on particular research programs that are incredibly important for that faculty member and also for the school. So the university's mission, broadly speaking, is always teaching, research, and service. And so teaching is obvious. Faculty also do a lot of service, but research is maybe something we talked a little bit about today and you'll learn more about throughout the program. But it's incredibly important. And I want to start at the bottom bullet with undergraduate research. And so this has really been developing, I would say, over the past decade or so, where the idea is that undergraduates, as soon as they can, should be involved in research efforts, either through an independent project or working with a faculty member so they can understand how difficult research is. You have all been through it, it sounds like, and so you know research is tedious, it takes time, it doesn't turn out as you think. And so if we're building all the way up to faculty research and grants and university research and budget, it really starts with an undergraduate understanding the function and the role and how complicated it is to do research. Because then you get students who are interested in a particular topic and realize that the way they're going to pursue that topic through the higher education system in the US is to go on as a graduate student and particularly as a PhD student. So when I became a doctoral student and passed my comprehensive exams and moved on to the research part, which is always the hardest part, I remember getting a letter from my faculty advisor that says, we welcome you to the dissertation portion of your doctoral program, and we are looking forward to your contributions to the field, your original contributions to the field and the topic that you've chosen. And so it gives you a sense right off the bat that as a PhD student, as a grad student, and you're doing a dissertation, your expectation is that you're contributing to the field with your research. So that's an incredibly important thing to think about, as then those PhD students then move into faculty who are at universities carrying out research, seeking research grants, and helping to grow the university research budget. And you may or may not know this, but universities in the US are classified based on their research output. And so there's an R1 and an R2, and there's an R3. And each one has the R1 is the absolute highest amount of research output. So that would be like a University of Michigan or Michigan State. Oakland is called a high research output. And so we're an R2 or research 2 school. That means there's a lot of research going on, but we're not at the highest category yet. So all schools are talking about research, seeking money for research, wanting more publications and more things that are focused around research to reach that highest level of research or an R1. So we talked a little bit about the university, the research, but they're also more than just a classroom. So I wanted to just give you a few other pictures and some ideas about everything that a modern university in the US encompasses beyond the classroom and beyond research, right? So you may or may not know, but many universities have sports teams that are attached to them, and students go out, and you can see the whole student body behind this American football team. And this is one of my favorite pictures because it shows in the white University of Michigan, right? And in the blue, my university, and he's catching the football over the University of Michigan to go off and score a touchdown. And so sports are very important in the life of the university. They bring a lot of spunk to the student body. Everybody is behind the sports teams. There are many athletic scholarships that are given for students, and our student athletes are a big part of our campus life. Research, obviously, we talked about in here, 2 undergraduates carrying out research on our campus. So one of the things that's sometimes different about the United States higher educational system is there's a lot of group study, a lot of working together in groups, and really working with each other as individual students and learning from each other in addition to learning from the faculty member. There are lots of clubs. You can see here's a picture of students on a day where they're brand new students on the campus. In addition to their curricular, they are milling around here looking for co-curricular. What can I do that will help distinguish me at this university? Maybe there are research clubs here, maybe there are sports clubs, maybe there are things that have to do with arts and culture. So this is a very important part of university life in the United States. Classroom can also be very traditional, working in classes or working in lecture. So this is still a very traditional way and very much used in the United States in terms of education. And you can also see a classroom that's set up in a more interactive way for a smaller seminar. So there's lots of different ways that students interact with their faculty members at the university. Just a couple quick things about academics in the United States. So in many universities, people specialize right away. I spent a long time in Europe. I lived in Europe for 10 years, and in many European systems, students specialize right away in what they're hoping to study or what they hope to have a career in. So in the United States, there's always a core or a general curriculum that tries to keep you well-rounded. So students who are in science, technology, engineering, and math, so STEM students will also take non-STEM classes. I know I'm a non-STEM person, and in my university experience, I had to take math and science even though I didn't want anything to do with it, right? So there's a general curriculum in the United States, and then you specialize really as you move into your third and fourth year. You select a major that is the subject that you're interested in studying, and you usually do that further on in your university career. There's some majors like nursing where you know right away and you start out your first year in nursing, but most programs you have a little bit more flexibility. You can change your major. Participation in class actually counts toward your grade. So many faculty members on their syllabus will show you what percentage of your grade depends on your participation in class. There's a lot of team projects, teamwork, faculty office hours where you go and interact with your faculty outside of class. The ability to write is important in the US system. You have to be clear and concise and not complicated. Public speaking and presentations are incredibly important. And developing what we call competencies in addition to your grades. So you may have perfect grades, but if you don't have any presentation competencies and other things that are going to be important for your career, it can be difficult. So there's lots of emphasis on developing those competencies as well. And that's it. That's our golden grizzly. That's our mascot. So I just wanted to end with that beautiful grizzly face, and then maybe just start a discussion and take some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all. Great. Thank you, Marianne.
Thanks, Rosemary. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, or if you would prefer to write the questions in the chat. We'd also want to hear from you about how this differs or is similar to your universities?
May I ask a question here?
Sure.
Though it's not important. When you were giving a presentation, you talk about the for-profit institutes. So you said one thing, that campus life is not as important, if at all. So what does that mean?
Yep. So a lot of for-profit institutes have courses that are online.
Okay.
And they also, one of the things that they also do is they find, let's say, space in an office building in the, let's say, in the middle of center of a city or downtown, right? And so they have a much different feel to them than, it's more like a training feel than a campus feel. So there are a few, I think, that potentially have campuses that seem like more like a campus, but in most cases, that's not the market they're going for. They're really going for an adult learner who is busy, who wants to just come quickly and access a class, or maybe log in from home and complete their coursework. And so you don't really have the same kind of campus feel and all those bells and whistles and parts that I talked about with respect to a campus. You know, there's little to no research that goes on at a for-profit campus. And so they're people who might dispute that, but if you think of your research agenda, it's really not going to be at a for-profit campus. And if you think of how important research is to feed into teaching, right? So research gives life and breathes life into teaching. So you have something new to say to students, and you have something that you are constantly renewing, and that's research, right? So that is also kind of one of the pieces that they would most likely miss compared to a not-for-profit.